Fellow citizens, pardon me and allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent have to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? Okay. And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty an unholy license. Your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up the crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation of the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam all through the monarchies and despotisms of the old world. I dare you, travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. That was Frederick Douglass's Independence Day address on July 4th, 1852. Yeah, he ate them the fuck up. All right. That speech was wildly impressive when you consider the fact that he was not even an American citizen. He was still not, like, black people had not yet gained their citizenship in America when he made that speech, calling out the hypocrisy of everybody in that room. And he was speaking to Northern liberals who thought they were the good guys, which makes it even better. And here's the thing about that speech. The level of courage and passion that he displayed was not a rarity among black people. Not only was it not rare, again, I have my notes. Not only was it not rare, it was so common for blacks in the South to run away and to rebel. In fact, 500,000 of them ran away during the Civil War. And for blacks in the North to advocate for abolition and clock white people's tea, that they removed most evidence of it from the history books so that you wouldn't get any ideas. Yeah. First of all, the black spirit is the American spirit. The black spirit is the perfect embodiment of the American spirit because we were never with the shits. Please don't get it twisted. We were never down for the type of shit that they were trying to pull. And that's why I want to address two huge myths before I really start to get into the black American heroes and a couple of white American heroes that existed in the mid 19th century, mid 1800s, around the time of the Civil War. Before we start talking about those truths, let's talk about the lies. All right. First and foremost, and this is a myth that exists to this day. When I was in 5th grade, my white friend Casey told me that she used to want to be black because it looked like black people were always having fun. I'm sure if you're black, you've heard that, or even if you're white, you've heard that. Like I saw somebody on the internet a couple of years ago say that her dad goes on cruises because he loves to watch black people have fun. That belief stems from the myth of the happy slave. So the myth of the happy slave was created by white people who were mistaken on two fronts. Okay, the first front. They told themselves that their slaves were happy because not only did they want to believe it, but they underestimated the power of code switching. You have to think, like, these people did not see black people as human beings. So they underestimated the fact that black people could act, and that black people could be fake, and that black people specifically could fake it in front of them. They didn't understand what code switching was. To these white people who underestimated the humanity of the black people around them, they thought that because the black people acted happy in front of them under duress and threat of violence, that the black people were actually happy. They didn't think that they could pretend. And in fact, there's a really interesting quote from a South Carolina slave owner in 1865, and this man is scandalized because all of his slaves were running away and joining the Union Army, and he legitimately felt betrayed because he legitimately thought they wanted to be there. He said, "The conduct of the Negro in the late crisis of our affairs has convinced me that we were all laboring under a delusion. I believed that these people were content, happy, and attached to their masters. But events and reflection have caused me to change these positions. If they were content, happy, and attached to their masters, why did they desert him in the moment of his need and flock to an enemy whom they did not know, and thus left their perhaps really good masters whom they did know from infancy?" That, when I tell y'all, when I tell y'all white people, some white people exist under a permanent state of delusion, they thought that these people that they had enslaved from birth for generations felt loyalty toward them. And some of them did. Some of them did. Like, you know, like the Stephen from Django, the Stevens. Somebody in my comments told me that Uncle Tom was a derogatory term because Uncle Tom was actually like a freeman who was like a respectable black man. I'm going to have to look more into that because I thought Uncle Tom was from Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to have to look into it. But there were some black people who felt loyalty toward their white slave owners. But the fact that so many white slave owners were legitimately shocked and hurt and betrayed when the first chance they got, their enslaved black Americans ran for the fucking hills. That's crazy, right? So the myth of the happy slave, the first front that white people were mistaken on was the fact that the slaves were happy. The second myth is the idea. Hang on. Let me gather my thoughts. Okay, yeah. So when it comes to the happy slave, white people were mistaken on two fronts, right? I already said that. The first front was they wanted to believe their slaves were happy and underestimated their code switching abilities, right? The second front that they were mistaken on is that they mistook our connection to our humanity and our families and our communities and our identity as happiness and contentment. Like they saw the strength of the black spirit. They saw the strength of our connection to ourselves and the people that we loved as happiness and contentment because they didn't understand what it is they were seeing. So this is when we get to hear from John Little. John Little was a former slave. And he says, "They say slaves are happy because they laugh and are merry. I myself and 3 or 4 others have received 200 lashes in the day and had our feet in fetters. Yet at night we would sing and dance and make others laugh at the rattling of our chains. Happy men we must have been. We did it to keep down trouble and to keep our hearts from being completely broken. This is as true as the gospel. Just look at it. Must we not have been very happy? Yet I have done it myself. I have cut capers in chains." He's essentially saying that the happiness that slaves exhibited was a determination to not let their hearts be completely broken and a refusal to release their attachment to their own humanity despite how many people were trying to strip their humanity away from them. The happy slave was a black person who was trying to survive in a world that told them that they didn't deserve to exist. Because, like, what choice did we have but to make ourselves laugh? What choice did we have but to make up songs and make up stories to tell around the campfire? Like, we had nothing else but our souls. They took everything else away from us. They took our language, they took our hair. They literally used to cut black hair and stuff furniture with it. They took our lives, they took our children. And yet, despite all of their efforts to destroy blackness from within, they only succeeded in fortifying it. Joy has always been resistance for black people. It has always been resistance, because to actively choose joy, to actively cultivate whimsy, to actively hold on to yourself and your dignity and your self-respect is resistance in the form of the greatest oppression, which is exactly what we as the black community are doing today. Trump ain't nothing new. That motherfucker is from a long line of colonizers. This is not the first time we have seen this, and I promise you it won't be the last. People like him always exist. And the black community learned a long time ago that if everything around you is on fire, if there's absolutely nothing you can do at all, if you have no power at all, which almost never happens because we always have some power, even the slaves. I'll get to that in a second. If you have no power at all, the least you can do is tell a fucking joke. The least you can do is sing and dance with your family and be happy, which leads me to the next myth. So there were two myths, right, that we're busting. We're busting these myths the fuck up. The next myth is the myth of the black family. They say that slavery disintegrated the black family unit, that the disconnect in the black community comes directly from slavery. I say that's bullshit. I say that's a colonizing lie, and that the black unit, the black family, the black community has always been an indomitable force in America. Now, for this next part, I'm just going to read. I'm not going to analyze. I'm not going to tell you guys what I think. I'm just going to read, and I'm going to let you do with that what you will. You let me know how this sits with you. It was once thought that slavery had destroyed the black family. And so the black condition was blamed on family frailty rather than on poverty and prejudice. Blacks without families, helpless, lacking kinship and identity, would have no will to resist. But interviews with ex-slaves done in the 1930s by the Federal Writers Project of the New Deal for the Library of Congress showed a different story, which George Raywick summarizes. The slave community acted like a generalized extended kinship system in which all adults looked after all children, and there was little division between my children for whom I'm responsible and your children for whom you're responsible. A kind of family relationship in which older children have great responsibility for caring for younger siblings is obviously more functionally integrative and useful for slaves than the pattern of sibling rivalry and often dislike that frequently comes out of contemporary white, middle-class nuclear families and composed of highly individuated persons. Indeed, the activity of the slaves in creating patterns of family life that were functionally integrative did more than merely prevent the destruction of personality. It was part and parcel, as we shall see, of the social process out of which came black pride, black identity, black culture, the black community, and black rebellion in America. Old letters and records dug out by historian Herbert Gutman show the stubborn resistance of the slave family to pressures of disintegration. A woman wrote to her son, from whom she had been separated for 20 years, quote, "I long to see you in my old age. Now, my dear son, I pray you to come and see your dear old mother. I love you, Cato. You love your mother. You are my only son," end quote. And a man wrote to his wife, sold away from him with their children, Send me some of the children's hair in a separate paper with their names on the paper. I had rather anything to had happened to me most than ever to have been parted from you and the children. Laura, I do love you the same," end quote. Going through the records of slave marriages, Gutman found how high was the incidence of marriage among slave men and women, and how stable these marriages were. He studied the remarkably complete records kept in one South Carolina plantation. He found a birth register of 200 slaves extending from the 18th century to just before the Civil War. It showed stable kin networks, steadfast marriages, unusual fidelity, and resistance to forced marriages. Slaves hung on determinedly to themselves, to their selves, to their love of family, their wholeness. A shoemaker on the South Carolina Sea Islands expressed this in his own way. I was lost an arm, but I hadn't gone out of my brains. Meaning, I may have lost my arm, but I still have my mind. And then he goes on to talk about how this family solidarity carried into the 20th century. There was a remarkable Southern black farmer named Nate Shaw, and he recalled when his sister died and left 3 children behind, and his father proposed sharing their care. And he basically wrote back to his father saying, of course, let's take them in. Like, we're going to keep our family together, but let's, you can keep the 2 little ones, I'll keep the oldest one, but let's make sure that we raise them around each other and never let them forget that they're brothers. And he goes on to talk about, Howard Zinn goes on to talk about how the strength of the black community showed through their songs and their stories, which would be complex mixtures of adaptation and rebellion. And then there's like a Negro spiritual here that I'm not even going to try to sing because I'm going to sound like a fucking idiot. They would put on these cute little like plays around the slave cabins where they would mock white people. And then the spirituals, the Negro spirituals, often had double meanings. And they often were like speaking in code when the overseers were around. They would be singing these Negro spirituals. Like one is called O Canaan. Canaan, I'm not sure. O Canaan, sweet Canaan, I am bound for the land of Canaan, which meant that slaves were about to go north. They were about to run away to the north. So they would sing these Negro spirituals as messages to other slaves like, hey, lock in, this is what's going on. And then, so Levine, hold on, who's Levine? I just got lost. Oh, Levine is an author who wrote about the black experience during slavery. He refers to slave resistance as pre-political, expressed in countless ways in daily life and culture. Music, magic, art, religion were all ways, he says, for slaves to hold on to their humanity. While Southern slaves held on, free blacks in the North, there were about 130,000 in 1830 and about 200,000 in 1850, free blacks in the North, agitated for the abolition of slavery. I'm going to stop there because in the next part, we'll talk about the abolitionist heroes, all the way from David Walker, a little-known hero, to Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, because black women played a major part in emancipation. I wanted to make this part of the video, and I meant for it to be 10 minutes, but fuck it, we're here. Like, it's going to be as long as it's going to be, and I'm taking my time with this book, and especially this chapter. Because I wanted to show the 2 myths that still plague black people to this day and call attention to where the black spirit comes from, why black people present the way that they do to the outside world, and where black culture came from. Black culture was born out of a fetid determination. I don't even know if fetid is the right word. Black culture was born out of a willful determination to hold on to our humanity by any means necessary. And I believe that attachment to humanity via black culture is why black culture is so beloved around the world, and why it has given rise to so many other things, so many genres of music, so many types of food, so many types of style and dress and hairstyles and language and all different types of things, because black culture is fundamentally an expression of humanity.